What's happening, financial coaches? It's Pete here. Hey, I wanted to quick address something that I've seen come up a couple times here from financial coaches as well as the public, but from financial coaches, probably most importantly, because I think it could get you into trouble. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I've been doing this a long time. And one of the problems is that I think it might get you sued. Or at least it can possibly get you sued. And this is maybe one of the reasons that you want certain insurances in place, but it is touting index funds in a strong way. And there's probably two classes of people that do this. One, non-licensed, non-professional, just friendly conversations. You're at a barbecue, standing around, and someone's saying something like, you should only get index funds. You gotta get the cheapest thing, the lowest expense ratios. You don't want to pay any fees. Blah 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 blah. And what you probably are doing is something you're probably not allowed to. By any legal standard or security recommendation, suitability, fiduciary duty standard, but it's probably not going to get you in trouble because probably no one is saying that there's any type of professional relationship there. That even though you're probably giving some advice that you're not supposed to, it's probably never going to go beyond that. If someone invests in something and it doesn't work out well for them and they go to court and they're like, well, you were talking at a barbecue or something like that, my guess is that doesn't feel like you're going to have much of a case there. The issue is that when someone transacts money with you, say in a financial coaching relationship, and if you were to dispense that same kind of barbecue discussion advice, then I think there would be reason to assume that it's a legitimate recommendation. And that's why I want to be very careful about what we say. Now, I will tell you that generally in the financial coach non-licensed arena, anything that deals with any type of regulated product, service, equity, security, things like that, you should just stay away from anything that isn't just general education. You can even name something, but you don't want to do anything that's saying, hey, I suggest this, or I've definitely said some things like, hey, you might want to look at an index fund or an index ETF, and here's some that you might want to look at. But I've always stayed away from making sure that it's not a recommendation, and sometimes explicitly saying, listen, this is not a recommendation. I cannot give you a recommendation. I cannot give you advice. Please seek the assistance of a licensed professional in this space. And what that goes for legal, tax, as well as investing and insurance advice, which is always good to have in your back pocket to make sure that you're saying that. And a lot of times, I was on a recorded line to make sure that I had that kind of backed up, but I had my insurances behind me as well. Now, I bring this up because it might be one of those things that you say in a conversation like, hey, the most important thing is to understand the expense ratios. Well, that is something that's important, but that's kind of retail level, consumer grade advice, because the cost of something is not the only thing that someone should think about when they're making investment decisions. And obviously someone who's licensed in that space will give them the criteria that's appropriate for them, performance and volatility and risk adjusted rate returns and all sorts of other things are going to go into making a suitable recommendation. So you want to stay away from that. But my point here is that just because you say something and then you hang up the phone or get done with your coaching call does not mean you might be off the hook. So you might say, well, I don't know, I kind of danced the line on that. And my issue is that I can see a situation where someone might say, listen, index funds, do generally very well. They're very low cost. For me, I only invest in index funds. I think they're the way to go. It just keeps it really simple. You don't have to kind of screen for a lot of things. And then someone will listen to that and then invest in index funds. And you might think, hey, nothing else of it ever. And then 5 years go by, or 10 years, or 15. And I have seen people in the high teens or 20 years later get sued on investment recommendations because now we have a certain amount of time. Now it's much easier to compare what that did versus another option. And I have seen people who are licensed and insured, luckily, get sued because something they recommended 18, 19, 20 years ago versus what they could have had underperformed. And I've seen people get sued for the amount of underperformance. Now, if you're not licensed, you don't have the insurance backup on this. I want to be very, very clear that I think you should try to stay away from that kind of stuff. Anything that might seem like a recommendation or pushing someone to a certain type of investment. Again, education in general on these things. Hey, an index fund is a fund that tracks a basket of securities that doesn't change. It's not actively managed or doesn't change often unless the index changes, those types of things. Usually has very low expenses, kind of explaining it without going into something that sounds or intimates a recommendation is the way to go. So I bring it up not because um, some of that suggestion isn't right or wrong. I bring it up because just because you've hung up the phone and a day goes by, or a week goes by, or a year goes by, and you think, hey, I'm off the hook. A lot of these things will come back to haunt people years later when there's more evidence to the different or skewed performances or dispersion of performances and the kind of the delta between what they got and what they should have gotten. So, it's not a situation where, hey, I don't think people would do that. That's not fair. A lot of people, especially when they get to retirement age or closer to that, and they look at, hey, I could have had 1,000,004 instead of 1,000,001. They can't make up that $300,000 anymore. And so it's very easy for some people to say, hey, if I had just done this mutual fund instead of this mutual fund, and hindsight being 2020, great. But a lot of people will come back and try to claw back money from wherever they can. So just be very cautious about that. I've seen people say things. I've seen coaches or heard coaches on recordings say things that I thought were dancing the line, getting close, and maybe, like I said, technically keeping themselves out of trouble, but it sure sounded like they could get themselves into trouble. Things like, I only use, or I personally use, these types of things can be construed as a recommendation to someone. So that's just my advice. Take it or leave it. But if you don't have a license, I really stay away from some of those conversations. So anyway, talk to you later.